Welcome to the Work Awesome Podcast. This is episode number 1. I didn't warn you guys that this is episode 1.
Oh, good.
How to prepare for your first job. Today I have Megan, Macy, and Sarah with me. This is also the first time that we're in this lovely studio and in person. So welcome, everybody. This is a little weird because we're all in person, not going to lie. Quickly, just to go over the description of this episode, you just graduated from college or received the certification you need to enter the workforce. Now what? Where should you start? Is one job board better than another? Is your resume ready to share? Are your expectations of pay realistic? In this episode, we'll chat about how to prepare for your first career and share a few lessons that we've learned along the way. I actually did pretty well that time. I fumbled a lot yesterday, which was not good. All right,
No shirt needed.
yeah. Macy and Sarah, since you are new this season, why don't you go ahead and kind of just give a brief overview of what your job is? Macy, do you want to start? I know before, and I mentioned this almost every episode, we are a government contractor, so our work varies a lot. Macy works directly for one of our customers, so she isn't going to be able to give too much detail about her job, but she can give some general overview of what she does for kind of day to day. So go ahead.
All right. Hello. So what I do is I actually work on the naval base with our Australian cooperative partners. So it's my day-to-day is pretty much interfacing with them and knowing the ins and outs and giving training sessions of, how to interact with your cooperative program and more training sessions of how the contact officers, for example, for these people, I give those trainings as well. But mainly it's just learning how to get along with your cooperative teams.
Yeah, so a lot of coordination. It sounds like a lot of training stuff. And your actual title is Test Information Manager, correct? Or is that not correct?
No
longer. Okay. So what is it now?
That was the previous one. Now it is I am a disclosure analyst.
Disclosure. Okay. So I'm going to tell our IT team to fix that because that's not right in our system.
It was right like a few months ago.
Oh, okay. Sarah, you have been on the podcast before. You're part of the communications team at the corporate office. Give a little background on what you do for AVIAN.
Like you said, I work for corporate, so a little bit different than Macy. I sit in the headquarters office. I have the privilege of working with Ian. I do mostly internal communication, some external communication, and mostly graphic design. So mostly still communication, whereas Ian is the opposite. He does more video and audio.
Yeah. So Sarah joined the team, and that means I don't have to do graphic design anymore, which is great for everybody.
What? That's fun stuff.
Yeah,
it really
I love
is.
it.
I like it, but Sarah's way better at it than I am.
Drawing, but getting paid for
Yes.
it.
Yeah, and on the computer, so
Right.
not drawing, because I don't like drawing.
All right, and everyone knows I'm the integrated communications marketing specialist for the company. Megan is a recruiter for the company. And let's jump into some of those questions I went through during the description. So this conversation is pretty much going to run right through there. Graduated from college, now what? So think back. For me, it was a while ago, but for you guys, maybe not as long. When you first graduated from college, what were those first steps you took out getting into your career fields? Whoever wants to go first.
Okay, I was like, who's cute?
I can go first. It doesn't matter. For me, I graduated college, moved back home. My mom was living in New Jersey at that time, so I moved back in with my mom. I didn't have a job lined up right after college. So it was pretty much immediately like, all right, I graduated. Now I need to find a job. For me, it took a little bit longer. I actually worked at a restaurant for like 6 months or so, and then found my way to where we are now, not at this company, but for a nonprofit in this area. The nonprofit operated a lot like a chamber of commerce. So I met a lot of really interesting people, a lot of high-level people, which then eventually led to where I am now. So there was definitely a path there of kind of getting into base level, entry level communications field, and then figuring out what the next steps after that would be. So that's what I was looking for. Anyone else want to kind of give their
Okay.
path to?
I'll do that.
Sure.
So right out of college, I expected to find something within my field. I went to school for marine science, so I'm sitting here looking for science jobs, anything biology related. So I actually went through quite a few jobs because a lot of those jobs are grant funded, and it's a long story, but grant funding doesn't last forever.
Right.
So I had some pretty bad jobs. Like I was working with inmates at a job.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And eventually, a friend of a friend kind of recommended AVIAN to me, which I was surprised because it wasn't in my field at all. But they wound up taking me because of my statistical abilities. And it was actually a really good fit, surprisingly enough. So you don't necessarily have to find a job within the degree that you got to be happy.
Yeah, and we actually do talk about that quite often on the podcast. Quickly, so we know your current title. What was your title when you first got hired at AVIAN? Do you remember?
Test information manager.
Was it? Okay. Mm-hmm. So and maybe Megan or Macy, you can talk to us. Are there levels within that title, or is it like pretty much, you don't know? You don't know either. It's fine.
Not really.
I wasn't sure if there was like entry level and you just come on and then you make your way within the test information manager to like a senior level and so on or what.
There was kind of, but then they merged the two positions,
Gotcha.
So it kind of defeated the purpose anyway. So they called us all the same titles anyway.
Gotcha.
So.
Gotcha. All right. So Sarah or Megan, you want to?
Yeah, I'll jump in. For me, when I graduated, I think I started applying for jobs when I was still in college. I interviewed at so many places. I was looking for specifically like a PR job, but I ended up coming back home here, St. Mary's County. I didn't work for maybe like 4 weeks, and then I ended up getting a job as like a marketing assistant. A lot of it was data entry and not marketing related. Yes. I probably did like 10% marketing stuff. But I stayed there for about a year, and that's where I realized like what I really wanted to do, which is when I came to AVIAN and like actually started doing what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I started off at a job that I knew I wasn't going to stay at.
Right.
And around here also I was with a like private company that had nothing to do with the base, which is unheard of.
It really is.
Yeah. So when people ask me, like, oh, where were you when you first got out? I'm like, some random company.
That's funny. Yeah, I still haven't graduated, so I'm still working on that. But I think, so I kind of just started in fast food and retail and then hospitality and the norm of that. But as I've been taking classes, I've been able to, I kind of found this position, and even the one prior to this, when I was working for a behavioral health organization, that's where I got a lot of my recruiting experience that kind of just fed into what I actually really like doing is working with people. And this was a really good field for me. So for me, continuing that education and still working towards that degree has been helpful with even where I'm at now, and kind of being able to grow on that. So still a journey to get there, but it's been helpful.
You got this.
Yeah.
I also think that there's a good point there where you haven't graduated college yet, but we're able to find positions without a college degree.
Very much.
There's still training out there that proves that you are an expert or good at the stuff that you want to do for your career.
Yeah, I would say definitely one of the things that I think got me where I'm at now at such a quick point, even without my degree, was with one of my previous jobs, I became a manager and I moved up in the company. So I was really invested in actually trying to do more and to take on more. And I think when I found like my big person job, I always say that, but like my next like real, not, because I was working at a jewelry store at the time. And working at a jewelry store as a manager was a lot. It was a lot. But it helped me be able to kind of get into a field that I had no idea what behavioral health was when I got into that. And then when I came here, I was like, what are all these terms? What are you guys saying to me? Yes. It took so long. But that helps. So I would just say, even if you don't have a degree, one, definitely make sure you kind of take those chances, because sometimes there are opportunities that you can still get a position without a degree. Yep. And two, just give your best no matter where you're at. And I've always said, like, even if you're like, I don't know, picking gum off the floor, like do it the best that you possibly can. Yeah. So you can move up, and that helps be able to kind of get you in windows and doors you think you may not have been able to.
Yeah, and the moving up part of that, it always, and you can probably talk to this more than I can as a recruiter, it's always nice to see when you have progression and constant progression in a job, even if you are picking up gum off the floor. Maybe
Best gum picker upper ever.
the next person picks up popcorn or something. I don't know.
Yeah, sweeping hair. That's the
Right.
next upgrade
Yes.
from that, I guess.
All right. So next question, job boards. Do you guys remember where, or maybe you didn't use a job board, what job board you found your first job on? Or maybe this question goes somewhere else. Do you have a favorite job board when you were looking for a job? Did you go directly to mine was always Indeed. This was before LinkedIn. Oh, I'm really old. This was before LinkedIn. LinkedIn had their job section, and they might have had it, but it wasn't as robust as it is now. So my stop was always Indeed. I would just type in random things. Fun fact, if you type in communications, you get every job available because everyone's looking for great communicators.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to be a little bit more specific if you're in communications looking to get a job. Maybe type in something a little bit more specific than communications.
Talking.
But mine was, yeah, you're right.
Exactly.
Mine was always Indeed. Do you remember where you found your first job?
I think Indeed's a good one from a recruiter standpoint, just because that's one of the most reputable. I would say if you were specifically targeting a company, to just go to their website too and apply directly from their
Yes.
website. But for actually my first 4 jobs, I just went into the place because I've always been taught that it was really important to take a paper resume and show face and show your, represent yourself the first time. So even if you're applying on the job boards, I still always went in and I was like, hey, are you hiring? And it just so happened that every time I went in, they were hiring and I got hired. I was able to do an interview on the spot. So I think just kind of making sure to represent yourself like that too is helpful. So that's what I did.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that to go directly to the company's website, because I would. So one tactic I would use, I guess, is that I would find the job on Indeed and then go directly to their website. And for me, it was just I think the recruiter might look at me different if I'm applying directly from their website and be like, oh, this person took the time to go to our website and to learn about the company, rather than just finding a job on a job board and applying that way.
Because we can see it. In
Yes.
fact, we do see when it comes to our tracking system where you applied through. So not that it necessarily looks better, but it also, in that sense, it kind of maybe looks like you actually looked and read the website and
Right.
you're showing more interest in it. So we do see that.
So I did use LinkedIn and all that good jazz.
Yeah.
But I will say, while you're in college, those connections that you make, if you are a college student, those are the big things. I didn't believe anybody when they told me they're make connections,
Yeah.
you'll get jobs. I'm like,
Yes.
no, that's not how this works. A lot of the time, most of my positions that I've gotten were from word of mouth.
Yep.
I did find an oyster hatchery job. I found that on, I think, Indeed.
Yeah.
So that was the one job I actually went to, a job board, and found. But most of them have been just word of mouth. And so make your connections.
Yeah, that's also a really good point. The ideal situation I would assume that people have in their mind is get an internship in college, do that internship, get hired by that same company. And it doesn't always work out that way. I interned for Goodwill Industries up in Frederick, Maryland during college. And if the director could have hired me, she probably would have. But because they're a nonprofit and don't have the biggest budget, there wasn't a position. So yes, there is this ideal picture of what you think is going to happen, but that might not always be the case. So those connections are super important. Even though she couldn't hire me, she helped me find people that were looking for employees. So
Personally, I use LinkedIn.
yeah,
But at the time, I want to say when I would go on Indeed, there was a lot of mixture between an office job and then a job at a restaurant. So it was hard to kind of filter through those because, like you said, I'm looking for communications jobs. And if you get really specific, especially in St. Mary's County, if I typed in graphic design, I'd get no jobs.
yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of a happy medium there. So I just found that LinkedIn had the most jobs that I was actually looking for, which is
Right.
why I used it. But I find it interesting that you say to like come in, that you would go in like with your resume, because I used to do that when I would apply for like restaurants and stuff, and that's how I've got all my restaurant jobs. But what if someone came into the AVIAN office and said, "Hey, are you guys hiring? Can I talk to the recruiter?"
I would venture out to say that that's happened before.
I know it's happened before, but I'm not sure anybody was here when it happened, because I remember it happening.
So that's the hard thing, though, because I've found recently a lot of people are turning you away, though, because they don't want the paper copies anymore.
Right.
So I think sometimes it's just good maybe just to show face, or just to say, hey, I put an application in, and if somebody is here, maybe ask to talk to them. But going back to the connections, too, I think LinkedIn has, the hashtags and stuff, too, so you can search jobs that way, which has been, I've seen a lot of people using. And that also can help you build your connections. So even if you're not actually physically applying for a job, if you know there's a company or a group that you want to work for, to be able to kind of go after, and I hate like stalking them, but like finding everybody who's in that company.
Stalking them.
And and getting connected with them, eventually they're going to see. So that goes back to an episode we did a long time ago about making sure your profile's like up to date. But I think those are all good sources.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Something about, Monster. So you said when you were looking for jobs, Indeed like kind of clumps jobs together now. For me, it was monster.com. When I was looking on that website specifically, I had that same situation where it would just be like these random jobs, and a lot of them are sponsored. Which means they're paying, like these companies are paying to make sure that these jobs are in front of you, and they had nothing to do with what I was looking for. So that does get annoying. For me, it was Monster. It sounds like Indeed might do that now. LinkedIn is a pretty good source, if I would say so. I think everyone agrees that LinkedIn is a good way to go. Mostly
job Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. It's that everything's in one place. It's just really easy to use and keep your profile updated for. It's basically your online resume, right? So, all right, talking about resumes, good segue. Resume ready. So we have had some discussions about resumes before. Let's just quickly talk about what your resume looked like out of college, and maybe versus what it looks like now. If you learned anything from handing that out of college resume to future employers or not. So mine, because I was in communications, because I was interested in graphics and video, was like this fancy graphical, probably nobody understood how to read resume.
Mine was the same way, by the way.
I quickly realized that might not be the best option. If you do some Google searches about like applicant like automation, basically, there's systems that are now reading resumes, and this has been around for a while, where they're reading resumes and basically denying you or putting you through. The graphical ones probably aren't the best for those. So definitely, my tip is just to keep it sounds boring, but keep it pretty simple and pretty plain as far as resumes are concerned.
I will say, too, the other reason for that is when it comes in through the ATS, a lot of the time it gets just torn apart. So it gets really jumbled. So I've seen like a lot of people, like a lot of graphics people who have like the fancy, banners and stuff on it. It gets destroyed. So sometimes we can't even tell what you do. So definitely be mindful of that. Right. Since I haven't graduated, mine was more so just like a lot of like entry level positions. But my resume, by the time I got to my first big people job, it was a lot of, I had gone from Wawa as a part-time person to a manager, and then I went from I worked seasonal at a jewelry store to a store manager, and I had done all those like within 2 years. So that was really good for me to be able to represent that. And the other thing that I would suggest too is obviously don't lie on your resume. No. We've had these resume talks, but it was helpful for me. Like when I applied for my job, one of the things that the recruiter said was obviously being able to hire people, and that wasn't the technical term for what I did. But as a store manager at the jewelry store, I was hiring people. So I kind of compared the job descriptions of what the companies wanted, and I was able to upload the things that I actually did because I didn't lie, but I was able to kind of intertwine those. And I would say even for college people who have graduated, and it's really hard because like they say you need these years of experience before you can start, but you can't get it because somebody will give it to you, to still include like if you did any internships during college or even the courses or classes you may have taken or certifications you got during that time, because we can still count that towards your years of experience.
Yeah, and I think you slightly hit on this, like tailoring your resume for the job that you're applying for. It's really easy just to like have this resume that fits every job you really want, but the ones that stand out are the ones that are tailored to the positions that you're applying for. Anything else? Go ahead.
In fact, there's this, there is a site, gosh, I do not remember it, but you can put in the description of the position that you're applying for, and it'll like bold the words that position's looking for. Because a lot of resumes go through like a filter system.
Right.
You turn it in, and they're like automatically filtering out specific words. Yeah. So you can put your resume in there and see what your words are that are bolded. God, I wish I could remember because it's a really good resource.
We'll figure it out, and we'll post a link. But yeah, I agree with that. Using the resources that are available to us now is extremely smart. Do your research. We say it all the time. Do your research, tailor your resume, use the resources that you have available. Any other resume tips that you guys want to talk about?
I did on mine since I worked at a restaurant for a really long time, and then I had because on mine I could fit 3 positions-ish, which is I think a good amount. And you don't want to do too many because you want to show that you're strong in those 3 positions. But the first one I did was the restaurant, and I just used that because I had 2 internships, and then I stayed at the restaurant for 6 or 7 years. So I wanted to show longevity with that, because obviously the internships were at most a year long. They were with my grade. So just showing that even if it's a restaurant and you're not applying for a restaurant job, just showing that you were a good worker, you did stay there for 6 years, and they wanted you to be there for 6 years.
Top jobs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Also, long resumes are not always good.
Right. One page.
So this podcast is very much tailored to a college audience, which this specific episode, I mean. People coming out of the Navy or coming out of any military branch, we know that there's a very general way that resumes are taught, I guess is the right word for that. Maybe cut it back a little bit.
5 pages long.
A little bit.
Most people aren't going to read past the first or second page.
Right. Mine was 4 pages out of college.
Oh,
Even after the resume class. That's the bad thing. I had a resume class, and it was
you're
still 4 pages.
No, I'm not listening to that.
No, I thought I could just ride through.
I think there's a time and a place. I don't know that every job requires this novel of past experience. So definitely be careful of that. Again, going back, do your research. Just kind of get an understanding of what people are expecting now. Could really help get you the job you're looking for. Hey guys, thanks for watching this video on YouTube. I just want to jump in and say that if you are not following the Work Awesome Network on all social media platforms, I highly encourage that. It's the place to get updates on blog posts, on new episodes, on basically anything related to the Work Awesome Network. So jump over to wherever you get your content from, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're on all the platforms. If you are interested, we also publish these same episodes on audio platforms, so you can listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and pretty much anywhere you get your podcast. So if you would rather listen to this in an audio format in the car, on the way to work, in the office, I encourage you to jump over to those audio platforms and listen there. I also want to say, if you're interested in learning about the company behind the Work Awesome Network, AVIAN, you can jump over to the AVIAN website at avian.com, AVIAN.com. Thanks again for watching this video. Please leave a comment, like, and subscribe. It helps the video out. It helps it get in front of more people. Thank you again. And now back to this episode. Let's talk about realistic pay. So this is a little bit difficult to talk about because nobody really likes talking about money. We do have an episode called Negotiating Salary, I think, where we talk a little bit about what to expect in at least the government sector, or the sector that we work in, because a lot of our salaries are determined by the contracts that we win. We don't really have much leeway for negotiating salary, unfortunately. But there are definitely places where you can negotiate salary, get maybe some benefits out of it. Straight out of college, I was like, yeah, I'm ready to make $50,000 and be able to pay everything off at one time. And then I got hired by a nonprofit.
Yep.
Yeah, it didn't happen that way. So I guess, again, this is a hard question. What were you guys expecting pay-wise right out of college? And Megan, I know you didn't go to college, but is there, on, I guess, the recruiter side, anything that you've seen from candidates that maybe are right out of college and they're like, expecting to get paid this super high salary, and you're like, yeah, you don't quite have the experience for that yet?
So actually, surprisingly, no.
Okay.
I think 50,000 is probably a pretty average number. That is normally a pretty
Now,
average
yes.
number now.
And for not a nonprofit organization.
Yeah, but I will say it's hard because we're now in this time where people with 15 years of experience could not be getting paid as much as the kid who just graduated college
Yes.
with a degree. So it's a really weird time that we're in when it comes to trying to figure out salary, because who should really be paid more, or who
Right.
should get that salary,
Right.
the higher salary. But I think that a lot of what I've seen is people wanting to pay off their debts, which is completely understandable, and that sucks, wanting to pay their loans off.
Yeah.
But I would say when it comes to like you're coming out of your first job, is do your research about what's the market value for where you live and the cost of living for where you live, and just kind of being realistic with that, because you're not, I mean, if you live in an area like Maryland where it could be higher, then maybe you can ask for more. But if you go to North Carolina where it's not as high, you're not gonna be able to do that.
Yeah.
So kind of understanding what it is and where you're at, but also with being realistic with yourself, because especially if you have kids or you have other responsibilities or anything, you still do have to make a certain amount of money to live.
Yep.
So just being don't go with the bare minimum of what you're going to scrape by and be house poor. You always want to ask for more and try to go up just a little bit. That way you can have some sort of freedom and you're not stressed out and dying. But I think that just being realistic with where you're at and what you need. And then the time comes where you're able to either be promoted or you move forward, and that comes with experience and time.
Yeah, I definitely think there's some calculations that can be made here to figure out some of those numbers. Like what is that baseline that you're going to be comfortable with? What do you need to cover that student loan each month? There's definitely calculations that you can kind of figure out ahead of time, and then look for jobs that fit that idea of a realistic pay. Anything else about pay?
I'm just going to chime in one more time
Yeah,
and
you're
just
fine.
say that when you want to do your research also on the position and what that position would typically pay in the area, because if you ask for something that's too much, you're immediately disqualifying yourself.
Yeah.
So but you also want to be fair to yourself. And if they say they can pay 60 and you lowball yourself, they're probably going to give you the lowball option.
Definitely.
So you really want to just do your research, even if you can't, because a lot of jobs now, including us, don't always post the salary because it can be fluctuating. So a lot of positions don't post that, but either finding reviews in the past or just kind of digging into it, just making sure that you're reasonable with that.
So now that we're talking about this, there are websites, LinkedIn is one of them, that has started posting like estimated salaries. I've always wondered, are those estimated salaries accurate for what people are getting paid?
Yeah, they're pretty accurate. I think
They
it's
are?
like Glassdoor.
Yeah,
How Glassdoor
has it.
Yeah.
There's actually a website called salary.com where you can put
Yeah.
in specific job titles and locations.
The annoying thing with that, though, because like my mom's a nurse, for example, and she always gets so frustrated because it'll say $15 to $38 an
Yeah.
hour, and then they go for 15 when they offer her the job, and she's
Right.
like, "What the heck
Yeah.
are you talking about?"
Right.
So sometimes they leave it really open, which is
Yes.
where it comes down to then you doing that even deeper research and then what you can or can't
Yeah,
live
I've
with.
seen postings that are like, you can make 25,000 or you can make 125,000.
And you're
It's
willing
like,
to work hard. That's
where
what they
are
always
you?
say.
I'll take the
Yeah.
125.
Right. Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
So it's funny, when I lowballed myself when applying for this position.
Really?
By
Okay.
a lot. I didn't realize it until I got the job offer, and I was like, I was in tears, honestly. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most money
Amazing.
But it's really not. I mean, it's literally like the average that you were saying.
Yeah.
But it was like, I lowballed myself like by like $20,000.
Right.
So when I got more than that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. Because I didn't know straight out of college how much to make either.
Right, yeah.
So these are good questions to ask. And, I'm sitting here thinking, well, it's a science job. I'm going to be making bank.
Yeah.
So I'm applying for all these high-end positions at like,
Probably some of the big name companies, right?
yeah. Of course, I can't think of them now because
Yeah.
I have been so far out of the field for so long. But I applied for like, I give up. Some government agency
Yeah.
for marine stuff. And it just didn't work out.
Right. Yeah.
And most companies are going to do what they can to make you happy. Like a lot of people aren't going to lowball you anymore, especially when you're in this world, like maybe fast food industries and things like that. But they're going to, a lot of the time, even we tend to come in on the higher end of things because we want you to want to work for us. We want you to be happy here if you're a good candidate.
It's definitely pretty competitive. So you want to stand out to your employer, but your employer or prospective employer wants to stand out to you as well. So lowballing you does not do anything good in anyone's situation.
Also, they're going to find out eventually that they're not making enough money. And at that point, you're going to have to pay them that anyway. And they're not going to be happy in the end because you did lowball them. So
Exactly. All right. So we just talked about salary. Was there anything else anyone wanted to add in about pay? I don't think I had anything else on that.
No, I don't think
But I can't remember at this point because we had some technical difficulties. The last question I have for you guys quickly, is there anything that you learned in your first position that college or high school or whatever the situation was couldn't have ever taught you? So this is like talking to other people, like the basics of office culture, hallway talk, water tank talk, whatever you want to call that. Is there anything that you learned in your first position that you probably didn't learn in college?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Straight up. So I actually got a new boss with this position who was very interactive with me because she knew I was a young professional. So she actually mentored me through a lot. One of the big things was excuses. I didn't know that they were excuses. I just wanted to explain myself why I messed up, but they don't care. That's an excuse.
Gotcha.
So, if you do something wrong, just say, hey, I'll correct that, but don't say why it's wrong.
Kind of taking like
know.
ownership of whatever the task or the project is. Yeah.
It's a big thing.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of people will dish out those excuses and be like, and kind of just expect to be given more opportunity and more chances. It's like, well, no, you at a certain point, maybe outside of college, you need to start learning what you need to take ownership of and fixing your own problems.
It was just me trying to explain myself, like why my mental path, why I took the way I did. So it came off as an excuse no matter what I did. So I was just like digging my hole,
There's a learning curve too. Like you have to forgive yourself because like you didn't know that when you first got out of college. And also you have to learn what your boss is like. So you go through college and all your teachers are learning, okay, how do all my students learn best? Or how do they receive information best? But when you get into a real life job or big person job, then you have to learn, how does my boss best receive information? Because like you want to please your boss, obviously, and everyone's different, so...
And it's not even just your boss, it's the other people that you work with. So in our office alone, I can tell you there's at least 10 different ways I communicate with people because everyone communicates in a different way. So I know if I want to get a response back from somebody right away, I need to do this. And it could be different for one person than it is for another.
Right, yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up. I think my first couple jobs just taught me how, even in school, because my degree is in communications, but I haven't learned this yet. I don't know if I will. But I
we'll
feel
tell you. Hold on.
I think it was more so, maybe I will, but I think it was more so realizing how to work with different people and like I'm a huge like, why are you this way? So I'm like, I want to know. And I think I kind of like was able to dive into that because you can always tell when somebody's like a little bit, maybe they're more grumpy of a person or maybe they're better in the morning versus the night or whatever the case was. So I think those real life experiences, you're not taught that in school. Like you're taught how to do your job. That's what you're taught to or how to learn that information. But I think managing yourself too, like time management and things like that. I know you are kind of taught those lessons in school, but just kind of figuring out your own groove of things and then how to work with separate people through that. Yeah. And that's been something that I feel like I've learned really well is how to deal with other people and how everybody functions. And like you said, even outside of just communicating, just like how often do we need to check in on this thing or on this task and, kind of going from there. So I think those are definitely real life in-person lessons.
Yeah, as we're talking about all this stuff, I'm thinking of a class I took in college, and I really hated it at the time, but now I understand why this professor did it. I don't remember the exact title of the class, but it had nothing to do with what she was teaching. What she was teaching was basically how to conduct yourself in a business environment. So like we literally went over, if you're at a dinner with other important people. You need to be doing these things. You need to be using this fork and this knife and this spoon. You need to be cutting as you're eating, not cutting everything and then eating. So it was weird at the time, and I was like, why are we doing this? This class has nothing to do with this, but
it's etiquette.
And
it teaches you other things too.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just about, oh, how do I eat my steak? Like, it's about how to be polite at a table, and not even just at a table, but even sitting around this table right now. That's funny that you had to take a whole class on that, because we had a steakhouse at our school that we could go to like once a week for our meal plan, and they taught us things like that.
Cool.
And they would like tell you, oh, you're cutting your steak wrong. Like, that's not where your water glass goes.
Interesting.
Yeah,
So
I did a class on that.
Thing?
Yeah.
I'm a barbarian. I didn't know this was a class.
So it wasn't actually the class. It wasn't public speaking. It was something, I feel like it was something to do with speaking. But this professor was just like, nope, I'm going down a different road, and taught us like the
this is
things,
important.
things we needed to
important.
know in a business environment.
I did that at Tech Center. I took hospitality and tourism at Tech Center, and we learned all of that, all of it, all the time. So I did it for 2 years. It was really interesting,
I'm
bringing
on
it
one of
into
those
the world.
pictures in there, by the way. I'm holding a deer pelvis.
Oh, jeez. All right. So any last minute, and we always go over a lot of tips for people just coming out of college. Are there any tips that you guys want to get off your chest maybe about for folks that are just graduating from college and finding their first career?
Be patient.
Position.
Be patient with yourself. And like you said, forgiving. Because from a recruiter standpoint, I see it all the time, like people getting really upset that they're not getting the callbacks. And it does happen because you don't have the experience. But I think, if you show up and you represent yourself in a way that maybe you're calling or you're coming to the company, don't come here and bother everybody a million times a day. But if you're doing those things, or you're representing yourself in a good way on, social media or LinkedIn or whatever the case is, it's going to happen. I think it's just a matter of, realizing you are just coming out of college. So be patient with yourself and just don't give up. And then like you mentioned too, like, if you went to school to be a counselor and you're not finding a counselor position, I'm not telling you necessarily to go straight into fast food if you can't find anything else. Sometimes you may have to do that. Maybe that's the only thing you can find. That's great. But be open to different options too. You never know what you might enjoy. And there's so many different aspects of a lot of the stuff that we go to school for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I was unemployed probably for about a year until actually finding my big person job.
Yeah.
And I would say just stick with it. I mean, even if it's a job that you hate, it's a means to an end. And regardless of what it is, it's experience on your resume. Yep. And, just take your time. You don't want to be stuck somewhere that you hate forever. So, do your best at that position and move on if it's not for you.
Yeah, and someone will take a chance on you. Yeah. So, like you said, be patient, and when they do take a chance on you, they know they're taking a chance on someone who just got out of college. So hopefully, fingers crossed, they're also being patient with you because they know that you're new to the field.
But that also means if they know they're taking a risk on you, you have to prove yourself in that way too.
Definitely.
So don't stress yourself out too much to the point where you hate it even more because you're stressed to go to work, but show up and do what you need to do.
Do that regardless whether you're just out of college or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I found better just being myself, getting a job, coming in here. Just I didn't have to put on a front.
Yep.
I'm not a front person.
Yeah.
I'm a hey, this is what I am, take it or leave it kind of person. So it was really nice coming here specifically because everybody's like that here.
Yeah.
They don't put on fronts to make themselves look good. They are good. It's like,
yeah, we have some
be you.
really nerdy people in our company, which is not a bad thing at all.
I have a D&D session tonight. Don't talk.
All right, so let's wrap this up. Thank you guys for joining me on this episode. Sounds like there's a motorcycle outside, but hopefully the microphones didn't pick this up or that up. On the next episode, we're talking about getting into government contracting. So you just graduated college, maybe you're interested in government contracting. How do you get your foot in the door at a government contractor? Again, thank you guys, and I'll see everybody next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fun.